Hello, and welcome to the Wanderings podcast, a photographer's exploration of art, science, and world culture. I am your host, Pedro Bonatto, a fine art and advertising photographer based in Toronto, Canada. In this show, I talk to artists, designers, scientists, filmmakers, authors, entrepreneurs, people who are creating inspiring work in a variety of fields. I have been working as a professional photographer and as a musician for a few years, and I'm often inspired by history, science, mythology, and popular culture in the photographs that I create. In this podcast, I try to go a little bit deeper in the stories that inspire me, and I hope will inspire you too. On today's show, we wander into the world of fashion, travel, and entrepreneurship with Alex Kenton. Alex is a style and travel blogger, an entrepreneur, and he is considered one of Canada's top influencers today. He has built a strong following around the globe, working with premium brands like Fendi, Hugo Boss, Lexus, BMW, and Coach. His luxury travel adventures have brought him to destinations all over the world, including Dubai, Rio de Janeiro, and Milan. In this episode, we talked about his love for fashion as a way to express personality and creativity, how he gets inspiration from little moments during his trips, and how he captures those in photos that, in my view, have a unique cinematic style. We also talked about his new company, Blank and Blue, where he creates a number of products, with my favorite being his designs of bracelets and wristwear. What I find so inspiring about Alex is his unique ability on finding and creating beautiful things and sharing them with the world. So, without further ado, here's my conversation with Alex Kenton. So today on the Wanderings podcast, I am with Alex, who is an amazing style and travel blogger. He's also an entrepreneur and one of Canada's top influencers. I had the chance to photograph him a couple of years ago, and since then I've been following his work, and I think it's amazing. So Alex, thank you for being in the Wanderings podcast.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, I've been following you too ever since then.
Yeah, so I remember since we did that specific shoot, which was one of the first times I was trying to get into fashion photography and those kinds of that genre of photography. I remember I was really impressed with your attitude, and I had this impression from other models that were signed with agencies that they were very, not, I won't say detached, but they had a specific aura. And you were always very super chill, super cool, and always accessible, which I think it's maybe one of the reasons, at least in my mind, that you have such a large following and such a devoted following, right, as well, right? So people actually do engage on your Instagram with all your looks and all the travel and all the works you're doing. So first, let me ask you, so can you tell a little bit about yourself and what you do on a day-to-day basis?
Sure. Well, as you mentioned, I'm a style and travel blogger, and I'm also an entrepreneur. I've been blogging since 2010, so it's been a long time, almost a decade, actually. And since then, I've also started my own brand called Blank and Blue.
Right. Yeah.
And it's a fashion lifestyle brand. What else is there? No, I think we're going to talk about everything. I don't want to spoil any surprises.
So let's begin with the beginning. So you said you started blogging almost 10 years ago. So walk us through the beginning of your journey, because I find always it's very interesting to see how people are right now. But when you started, so you went to Parsons School of Design, right?
I did, yeah. So I'm originally born and raised in Vancouver. Okay. And I had the opportunity to go to Parsons for university. So I studied design and management there, which was a business program that had design as well. And it was, obviously an amazing experience to be living in New York and going to school there. I felt like I was working already when I was 18, because just going around New York City and you're going to your school building and your classes, and you're like, wow, I'm just in the mix with all these people doing these great things in the city. And I had the opportunity to do an internship in my second year of university, and I worked for this PR agency, a fashion PR agency in New York. And there I, got my feet wet with the industry and started meeting editors and stylists that would come into the showroom. We put on all these events, we did trade shows, And from there, then I kind of thought, maybe I should get more into like the media and editorial side of things. Like in PR, we were always trying to please the editors and stylists, and we were like, we were sending them gifts, we were hosting them at dinners and things. And I thought, I want to be on the other side. That sounds so much better. So from there, I went and I got another internship in my third year of university at Condé Nast, and I worked at Details magazine. And there I got, had access to incredible experience, and some really amazing people were my mentors at the time. And then from there, I really liked how it was going, and then I thought, I want to see what it's like to do both men's and women's fashion. So then I had an opportunity to go to the New York Times style magazine at T, and that was also like a nice taste of luxury. They feature a lot of luxury and other lifestyle things beyond fashion. So that was really amazing to see, like the luxury fashion side, and we did high-end watches, high-end jewelry, and the things that I was able to see firsthand were pretty incredible. And all through those years, I was going to Fashion Week in New York too, and meeting people and making connections. And I think somewhere along the lines there is when I started my Twitter account, and that was the first account that I had, other than Facebook, but like my first public account, because Instagram didn't exist yet. This was like 2008, 2009. And then I graduated from Parsons, and I worked for another online magazine before actually starting my own, and it was called Kenton, and I had it for, I think, 4 or 5 years, and we had a good run of editorial coverage and building the brand. But while I was doing that, I realized that I actually liked sharing my personal style, and a lot of my followers on Twitter and then soon Instagram were really interested in my personal style. So that kind of took off, and I made the decision to discontinue running the online magazine and focus on my blog.
Right.
So that's kind of the long-winded journey of how I got to where I am now.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. Yeah, and it's interesting how there was like so many like different kinds of projects, and then what got you like really like great exposure was your own like personal style, right? And how all that influence get into like how you dress, how you and like lifestyle, how you work, right? So that's really cool.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was all the timing too, the timing of the way that the industry was going, the trends and what people were looking for online too, kind of dictated and helped me decide which direction I should go as well. So I think it had a lot to do with the industry timing. Like when I was at those magazines, we were all really already thinking about digital and thinking like, okay, online is the next wave, and like social media was picking up. Everyone was trying to get on Twitter or figure out like, how they were going to tweet, how their brand was going to have a voice. So cool. That was already kind of happening. And then I think I was fortunate enough to figure that out and go in my own direction.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I think at that time, like Twitter, you couldn't really put like images on Twitter, if I can't remember. You sort of like have to give a link to go somewhere else, right?
Yeah, at the beginning, it was like, I kind of remember something like these owl.ly owly links from Hootsuite and all sorts and tiny URLs. And then soon it was the photos. And actually, I originally got Instagram just for the filters. And I would filter my photos, then delete them off Instagram and tweet them. And I wasn't even using Instagram. I mean, not very many people were anyway. Were using Instagram as an actual network. And then somewhere along the line, it kind of took over and became an actual network. Yeah,
and that's one thing that like, since we're into that, like, so would you say that your favorite like social media today is Instagram, or is it like the most let's say impactful because it's such a visual media, right? It's or
I wouldn't call it my favorite, but I would also say that it is the most impactful. I think it's the one that people focus on the most. So I don't know. It's one of those, did the chicken come before the egg or vice versa? It's like, I like Instagram because it is so impactful. But then I'm like, well, if I had more attention on a different channel, would I like that one better? Who knows?
Right, I see.
Where would I spend more time? So, and then by spending more time on Instagram, then more people are interested in it too. So it's an interesting question, actually.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, no, I was just wondering because like with even like everybody uses like Instagram like in a different way, and you see a lot of like influencers working on that, and then there's always this wondering what will happen like for like even on Facebook, that organic reach stopped working, and so people will, even if you're following someone, it doesn't show up to them, so you're at the mercy of that. But that goes to your you have a blog that is like populated with like not only beautiful photography but great like writing, and you document not only your looks but your travels, right? So before you get into the blog, like what's your like a typical day for you? I know you will probably not have a typical day, but like how is your day to day on and how is your process on creating looks and going through all that?
Well, you're right. It's always different.
All right.
Every day is different, but every day involves coffee, involves emails, and usually a meeting. So that's and more often than not, usually shooting an outfit of the day. And I have one assistant full time who works with me, and she's fantastic. So her name is Vivian, and she's around. You'll see her in my Insta stories sometimes. And yeah, her and I are a team, and we kind of take on everything together. Usually she's my right hand. So, she'll come to meetings with me, then kind of we'll be like, all right, let's, the sun's out and it looks good right now, so let's do a shoot. So we like do an outfit of the day shoot at that point. And then, we switch gears and we're working on blank and blue. So now I think it's, before when I was just doing my blog, it was a little bit more crazy every day. Like there was more going on each day. But now, because of blank and blue, I do have more of a typical day in the sense that I have to, Vivian and I, we both have to tend to, our customer inquiries and emails of that nature. We're doing, our own PR and marketing for the brand. So we have certain tasks that we do every day for the brand. That is starting to become like a typical day, I guess. But then we have, all my blog and social media stuff, which then continues to be a lot of different stuff. Sometimes we're doing photo shoots like the one that I did with you a couple of years ago. Yeah. Where I'm being featured for a brand or for a magazine. The odd time I'll be going on TV, and that's like a really early morning. That's like kind of 6 a.m. 6 a.m. call time. What else do we do that's really interesting? No, you do a lot of things that are very interesting. Oh, and then sometimes there's travel, of course. That's totally different. Yeah, that's fantastic that you like. I remember like how your journey progressed over these years, and having one assistant, right, that can help you with both the business and the creative side. That's fantastic. So you mentioned your brand, Blank and Blue. So like, can you tell a little bit about your brand? Because I'm very excited about that one. Sure, for sure. Well, I think it's kind of. It's a little bit, at the moment, I would say it's a bit of an extension of me, an embodiment of my style. It began with jewelry the brand essence began with jewelry. I was looking for a few pieces, bracelets specifically. I love stacking bracelets. That's part of my personal style. And, there were pieces that I was looking for and I just couldn't find them. So I thought, I need to design these myself. And also a lot of the things that I like, fortunately, unfortunately, are very expensive. So, I was looking at things and I thought, I could probably design that better, or design like, something that I could wear every day. And also I want to be able to give my fans and followers the same style and aesthetic that I have, for an attainable price, a price point that's, not super low, like, fast fashion price, but something that they can aspire to, but also reach. So I went about that and began designing the jewelry, and then it kind of expanded to sunglasses, and then also t-shirts and hoodies, and those are things that I wear all the time. And yeah, actually we ended up launching last August with the sunglasses, even though that wasn't the original starting point. And yeah, kind of from there, it's been a steady climb, and we've had a whole new set of challenges that I've never had to deal with before. But it's been a really amazing experience so far, and it's quite exciting.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, it's so funny because I like personally the only kind of like jewelry I wear is actually bracelets. So like not right now, but I actually like I have a few that are like I don't know, I have about 10 that are like, oh, whenever I travel or if I go to like a specific shoot in a specific place, I will try to find like a bracelet that I like, and I always like follow on your always coveted your all the stuff you were wearing. And then when I saw that you were doing like that you were inspired, like, oh, I can't find exactly like this vision I have in my mind, and I have exactly the same thing. Like I have, oh, it would be cool to have a bracelet that is like this and that, or this kind of color palette, or this kind of a feel on your wrist. So I'm very excited, very glad that you were able to embark in this journey. It's really cool.
Well, we'll have to get your some blank and blue on your wrist.
No, for sure. But. and that's what's like this is a bit more, I'd say, because I was reading this a little like off tangent, but it's I saw this article because like in my photography work I'm interested sometimes in like in history or in mythology and all these things, and I found this they found I think in Turkey the 7,000-year-old piece of a bracelet. It's 7,000 years old, and it's actually like beautiful. Like, and then I was like, oh wow, we are so interested in this kind of thing since time immemorial. Like for you, is there like a reason that you can sort of like talk about why you were interested in why specifically like bracelets appeal to you?
You know what? I'm not even really sure. I feel like I've been wearing bracelets my whole life. You know, actually, it's funny now. I didn't even think of it until this moment today, but I had a phase when I was around maybe like 10 years old where I was making friendship bracelets and like making them for people. And at one point I was even selling them to my classmates. So I guess I had it in me from before. So that was like a dream that kind of got put on the back burner and brought out again today in 2018.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Which is funny that I just made that realization now. Yeah, it's just something that I've really enjoyed wearing. And I think for men too, we don't have a lot of options when it comes to jewelry and accessorizing as many as women.
Right.
That's changing now too, but traditionally we don't have as many options. So wristwear is definitely something that's appealing. I love, watches as well. And, putting bracelets with your watches is just a really cool look, and I've always been into it.
Right.
So,
no, that's fantastic. Yeah, and I think like that. Going back to your style, like for how do you choose your like garments? Besides, like, okay, there is a part that is let's say business oriented, that is like brands that approach you, and then of course you certainly like veto and see what you like and everything. But how do you approach your take on style, like and just to give you like one example, I was like the contrary of that. I was talking to a photographer friend of mine, and he said something that he is a fashion photographer, and then he only wears black all the time, and he says I dress to become invisible. And then I said, oh, that's your fashion approach. Like that's like, so anyone that says, oh, I don't have a style, you do. You always have a style. And I think it always tells about your personality. So like in your case, like how do you come about to create your style? Yeah,
well, actually, just to add on what you're saying, I think that it's interesting because that you mentioned that photographer and how he says like, I dress for this, or people who say like, I'm not into fashion and I don't partake in any fashion, but by even saying that you are, and that was one thing that we studied when I was at Parsons in fashion theory. It's just like your approach to style and fashion, regardless of what you think, even if you think that you're not partaking it, you are partaking it by putting on clothes. That already is saying something about you,
of course,
and what you choose. So for me, it's always been pretty eclectic and changing. It's always changing. But I think I always tend to go back to classics and comfort at the end of the day. And also you've got to just know your body. Like know my body shape. And so I kind of dress accordingly to what I think would be flattering. I've had some really weird and terrible looks in the past, and it's all documented online. So it's all stuck there on Google forever now. But I think, I mean, I love to experiment with fashion too. I think that's one thing that I'm confident in is, trying new trends, whatever they may be. I'll think that they're really cool and great at the time, and then you look back like even a year later and just think like, what was that? But for the most part, it takes time to figure out your personal style too. So for sure, I would say like some of the stuff that I wore in my university days and like shortly after was a lot weirder than now, but
well, you were in New York, and I guess it's also like as you're trying to develop a style for yourself. I remember when I started photographing, I would wear black t-shirts and khaki pants, and that was my uniform, so it's quite interesting. And slowly I started finding it more interesting, like how what you wear will influence so much of how you feel and what you're able. I sometimes think it's sort of like armor, right? It's sort of like how you put this on, and then it's either something you aspire to be or something that it's already in you somehow, right? So I find that
I think that style's totally cohesive and or that's the wrong word. I think it's I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, but anyway, it's totally related to your mood. And like when I get up in the morning, that kind of dictates whatever my energy and mood is that day. It dictates the vibe of what my outfit is going to be. And I'm very into like how an outfit speaks. It's kind of your first impression without opening your mouth, I think. And I love the idea of like moments. And I think that's what I try to capture too in my photos that I post on social media. It's like it's sharing the outfit, but also sharing the whole vibe and the mood of what that outfit is about. And so that's like definitely what inspires me as well when I get dressed. And like travel is such an inspiring thing for me, like just seeing how other people dress in other places. And like, I could just be standing on a street corner and see someone, and it maybe only a section of what they're wearing is what I'm looking at, like a jacket and shirt pairing, or like a shoe and sock pairing, and I can take inspiration from that.
Oh, that's interesting. So you see like a big, like, so you take a lot of inspiration for your styling when you were traveling as well?
Oh, for sure. Oh. Yeah, and from other people, from my friends, just in encounters with someone like in a store or something. I think inspiration's kind of just everywhere, and it's translating those moments. And I like to see things really cinematically. So that's also kind of an influence. And I think that's also a little bit of the inspiration behind Blank and Blue as well. It's very travel focused. And of course then the pieces are supposed to be easy to travel with, and like you can wear them for all occasions while you're traveling.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah.
But it's combining what you see out there and creating something that then kind of becomes timeless in a way as well. It's like it's taking that cinematic moment and turning it into something physical and timeless. So
interesting. It's an interesting point about the timelessness. Like on your photography, now talk a little bit about like your photography, because I really like how you process your that's the word for it, certainly. It's like a cinematic, and it's also this idea of like there is movement in your photographs, and there is also at the same time there is this like sort of like still this capture of a moment, as you said. It's like, it's like you out and about, say for example in the streets of Toronto or wherever you happen to be, and it's like you can see that you are on the go somewhere, but at the same time it's getting that little moment. It's like, okay, this is like me right now, and then that's the timelessness of the which is what I like. Photographically speaking, that's what appeals to me on the way that you photograph.
I mean, that's what appeals to me too in fashion photography. I think that's how, like, I guess that's probably how my style developed. It's just, looking at other images or video and just, I just love the moment. I think that's where like glamour comes from, really, is the moment, and that capturing that moment, and in a high speed environment. I love motion and dynamic balance and, you know, all of that in photos. That's what appeals to me. So that's kind of what I like to create as well. And yeah, like you said, it's kind of that on the go. You're busy, you're doing things, you're making your dreams happen. And it's like capturing just this moment along the way. And like, it's that little clip of life. And I love seeing too, I guess when going back to my little comment about inspiration and seeing things, oftentimes I'll see things and then they replay in my mind kind of in slow-mo. Like I'll see someone just like walk across the street, and like the way they walked and the outfit they were wearing paired with like the particular buildings that were in the background just like create this really slow-mo cinematic moment. Happens a lot when I travel, maybe just because the places I go are more aesthetically beautiful than Toronto. But you know, it's like just when you see someone, say in Florence, like just sitting at a cafe having an espresso, and like it's the way the light is hitting at that very moment, and you just see that motion of just like picking up the glass or picking up the cup in slow-mo. That's kind of like the whole the energy and the vibe that I get inspiration from. And then that's what I try to create in my photos too. It's just like inviting you in and inviting my fans and my followers into my life for that very moment, and trying to like share either a feeling or a mood, inspiration with them.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Actually, what you just said is how like I feel when I see your photos. It's pretty much it's inviting. No? For sure, it's inviting. It's that's one of the things that I find like in this new movement of of fashion being transferred to social media, to Instagram specifically, which is the platform that I follow the most for this kinds of things. But the interesting thing that I think it's different than even 10 years ago is that it's inviting. It's like, that's cool, I want that too, right? Or like, this is sort of like an aspiration for me to get into that. And I think that's what's beautiful and appealing about that. And that just like, I wrote it down because it's something that reminded me whenever I see beautiful things, is this quote from Dante Alighieri that he says that beauty is something that inspires you to act. So you see that. There, like, you see this beautiful beach, or you see this, like, a beautiful bracelet, which is my thing. And then, or you see, like, this beautiful, like, the color palette on something that represents either an emotion or a longing that you have. And then you see your life. Then you say, how can I get to this point, right? Like, this is possible. This exists in the world, even if it's stylized, which to me sometimes is even more real than real life, because it's what we aspire to. Those, as you said, the slow motion moments that they capture something that is important to us. And I think in photography and then in styling and in travel is something that you can explore, like who you are and who you want to become, which is, I think, is why work like what you're doing is so interesting and inspiring for people.
Yeah, actually, funny you mentioned that, because also I find that I look at my I look at my own Instagram feed and I'm like, this is like this is digital me. I always joke with my assistant Vivian, I'm like, this is digital me. I'm like, digital me looks like so much better than me today, or like digital me looks like so much more fun. I think it's it's kind of, social media becomes this like highlight reel, can become like a highlight reel. For me, it is anyway. And it's sort of a representation of my best life. And to me, it's also fun to put that together. And it's like, what would that look like? What does your ideal life look like? Obviously, it's, still real. There are real things that I'm doing, real things that are happening. But it's presenting it in a way that's also even inspiring for myself. And being like, pushing myself to be better, pushing myself to continue to be inspired, to continue looking for inspiration, and continue moving forward and growing as a person.
Yeah, that's to me as a photographer, that's the idea of like you create, even when like I do a lot of like more, I create little worlds and little things, and I think that images are very to use fancy words, but like very archetypical of our wants and needs, right? So before you would do a painting of what you aspire to be, or aspire to be at, or who you aspire to become. And I think like photography is a great reminder. I guess actually that's my take on bracelets is sort of like I don't know, a soul post-it note, like sort of like, oh, this reminds me of a specific feel or a specific, not necessarily a moment, but like something you are aspired to that is always with you, right? So it's sort of like this external reminder that you internalize in a way. Maybe it's a bit too much philosophizing for an afternoon, but that's at least like from this conversation I sort of like realized that's where my interest in those things come from. And then one thing I wanted to ask you was like in terms of travel, do you have like I know that every place you travel it will be like interesting even for the bad stuff or for the great stuff, but like is there a place that you like to go back again and again? Like it's not necessarily
Oh, for sure. Hawaii, number one. That's my favorite place on earth.
Okay.
I used to go a lot. When I lived in Vancouver, my family, we used to travel to Hawaii as a family at least once a year. It's so much closer than it is now from Toronto, so I haven't gone in a couple years. But it's just, I love it there. It's just the perfect paradise for me. Balance, and they have all your North American lifestyle needs, but also it's totally an island on its own, or a string of islands rather on their own. And it's just a laid back lifestyle. Everyone's friendly, everyone's happy. I mean, the sun is always shining, and it's just a beautiful place.
Yeah, I've never been there. I'm looking forward to it. Yeah, Yana and I, my wife and I, were thinking of where to escape in April. We're thinking either Mexico but like Hawaii. It's one of those places that I'm very interested in going. And I'm a science geek as well. So they have in Mauna Kea, they have this the telescopes and everything. So
you can even see, if you're lucky, you can even see actual molten lava coming out of the ground, which is so cool. I had the experience of seeing that on the Big Island only. That's the only one that's still active. But you can see the lava still coming out, and it just is, the island is growing every day, which is another thing that's just so cool about Hawaii, that, it's an active volcano, but it's not really erupting. It's just slowly building the island. And then on the other side, you've got all these flowers and palm trees, and it's so beautiful.
Yeah,
you have everything there.
Cool. So that's a place you go back again and again. And like, what's so that would be like your favorite like place on earth?
Though I will say you're from Brazil, so you might find it. You might be like, oh, this is like cool, but like Brazil is also really beautiful.
No, but I know what you mean. But it's funny. Like I know you went there, and I lived in a bunch of different cities in Brazil before I moved to Toronto, and I find like Rio is nice, and there's like a few other places like Bahia, which is a state a little bit to the northeast, and then Pernambuco, which is a different state that has like this beautiful dunes and beaches and everything. So I know that there is like a little bit of a competition there in the scenery, but it's so funny. Like I don't know how you feel about. Were you born here in Toronto?
I was born in Vancouver.
Oh, Vancouver, right? Yes.
Yeah.
So one thing that I've been thinking is like I've been in Toronto in Canada for I guess 8-9 years now, and before I lived in Brazil and I lived a few other places, but I haven't found a place yet that I can say this is home. You know what I mean? Like I like living in Toronto, is really cool, like for works. As you said, aesthetically, you have to really work to find, like, at least when you have a specific aesthetic, right? But you have to like really work to find stuff. There are beautiful places here, and there is all kinds of people in the world, like in Toronto, which I think it's unique around the world. But I still haven't found home. There are a few places I'm still like, maybe that would be like an interesting place to go and live for a little bit. So I was wondering, like, for you, like, what's your relationship between like home and travel? How do you see that? Are you looking for the next place you're going to be, or is Toronto home? How do you feel?
Well, I think Vancouver will always be my hometown. When I go back, I always feel like this sense of familiarity and just comfort. But I don't think I would ever move back there. It's just not really for me per se, but it does have like obviously this home feeling. Toronto is starting to feel like home now. I've lived here for 5 years. almost 6, I think. And that's about the same time that I lived in New York. So I have similar feelings about Toronto and New York, I think. And I have lots of friends in both places. So that does change, how you feel about the place. I think that it's about the people, really. That's what makes a place feel like home the most. But I never say never. I am comfortable here in Toronto, so I think I'll keep my home base here. And I'm Canadian, so I like, the comfort of having a place to call home in your own country.
Yes.
But I wouldn't say never to living abroad. I think, well, even my girlfriend Justine and I, we've talked about, maybe we'll live somewhere else for a few months of the year and then come back to Toronto and then go somewhere else. And like, I think we see ourselves not having a very conventional lifestyle, and like neither of us have conventional lives and career paths. So that kind of leaves the door open for lots of travel and adventure and stuff. But I mean, I like I said, I think Toronto would be my home base, but I wouldn't be opposed to living somewhere else, warmer maybe in the winter months, and trying different places and not being tied down to one place and feeling like you're stuck there.
Right.
And I think that's kind of the beauty of travel. And also, you're in control of your own life and your own destiny. So if you feel like you don't want to be tied down, then don't be tied down.
Right.
Try and figure out a way to make it work. And where there's a will, there's a way.
Right. That's great inspiration, and for sure that's one of the things that I think for me, it's sort of the same thing. And I think if you were able to stay like a month or at least a certain amount of time that you can reallocate to that place and let that place change you or like inspire you in a way that it's not like a frantic 10-day trip, right? Which can be fun too, right? But like when you can like let the place become a part of you, I think it's a cool thing to do. And with me it's sort of like the same idea. Like I haven't done the being 2, 3, 4 months in one specific place. Has been at most a month somewhere else. But it's very interesting to see like this idea of home being like, I'm from Brazil, and then whenever I go to my hometown, there's like, it's actually very much reminds me of Vancouver, to be honest, because it's in the south, so it's very
not as hot,
and it rains. Like so, like I know Vancouver
That's
rains
Vancouver.
too. Yes,
Rain.
It's
rain.
very much like the same idea. And it's like it's beautiful, it's nice, and all that. And then whenever I go to like my parents' house, where I lived for so many years, and it's still the same house, it always has that coziness. But I outgrew that city. It's certainly not for me.
So you know exactly what I mean. It's like it's that comfort, but you're like, it's comfortable because it's familiar, but it's not you now. It's you before.
Exactly. Yeah, it's the same feel for me. And I think that's one of the things that is so appealing for, and I guess with your followers, when you showcase all the places you go, and using also, that's the other thing that I find very interesting. You're able, even though you travel to so many different places, you can keep your aesthetic very consistent, especially on your photography and how you approach things. I really admire that. It's something that I struggle with myself like right now, because I'm interested in so many like different things, and there is no cohesion visually. I mean, there are a few things that are recurring, but they're still not there. So I find that very cool how you can integrate that.
That's interesting, because I think that it changes a lot.
Oh, really?
I think I go through these phases too, and like sometimes I look at old pictures of a trip and I'll be like, oh right, I was in that phase. Like, what an interesting way of processing the photos. I was like, I would do it differently now, and it's like, I think it's constantly changing. But then I think that maybe it's just that my style changes really slow, so it looks like it's It looks like it's the same, but it's slowly evolving.
Right. Yeah, I don't mean like being like the same. I just mean that there is like a thread you can see. I can certainly see the improvement.
There's definitely a common theme, I think, throughout all. yeah, I think it's like it's just changing really slow, so you don't notice that it's changing.
And I think that's a cool thing that like for your followers, like I guess do you know like a split of how many of your followers, like the demographics of the people that are following you?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, well, as much as I can get from the analytics from each social media, but it's about 50-50 men and women. And predominantly from the States. I have actually a lot of Brazilian followers. Oh, wow. I think because Brazil is such a big country and they're on our time zone, so they get served all of my content. But actually, it was funny because when I went to Rio a couple years ago now, there were so many people messaging me, and they were like, "Oh my God, you're coming! Like, this is so exciting!" And they were like, "Come to my town or come to Sao Paulo." But I was only in Rio. Yeah. Yeah, and then of course there's my Canadian followers, but Canada's such a small country, so they're not a huge ratio. They're pretty high, a high ratio for I mean compared to like I guess other people in the world, but not high compared to my American following.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Other larger countries.
Yeah, I guess because specifically like in social media, the US is so big.
Oh, there's just so many more people. I mean, there's millions and millions and millions of people.
Right. Yeah, it's like an order of magnitude more of than Canada. But it's interesting that you have a split of for like men and women. That's very cool, because like you mainly do like at least on your social media. I mean, I know on your brand you have female garments.
It's the blank and blue is unisex for the most part, except we have one pair of hoop earrings that's obviously for women. But everything else, all the bracelets are unisex, the t-shirts are unisex, and the hoodies are unisex too. So it's it's for everybody. Yeah, that's great, because I love this idea that like men are slowly over time getting more into like styling themselves and like reimagining themselves from that point of view. So to me, it's really cool to see. And even you like slowly like impacting me. Like my wife, she's a dancer, and then she's also doing like some photography stuff on Instagram. And then she is always like going out very like stylish, and then I was going out very, let's say, casual, to use a nice word. So slowly I'm getting. Then as I go and I started developing, like we went to Istanbul, and then more oriental style kind of like shirts and things, and then I was like, oh wow, like I actually like this like very detailed patterns, but not very flashy, but still like that. But it's like, oh cool, like starting to get into that. So whenever I go perform, I like to like play music and stuff. I like to I'll dress up for this for this specific occasion. But it's quite fascinating to see the change in men's approach in general. I mean, of course, there's always men that are interested in styling, but I think it's a growing market, right? Yeah, absolutely. I think that, well, like in history, men have a lot of cool fashion and more adventurous style, I think. And then somewhere along the way, they kind of lost it.
Right, yeah.
And now it's coming back. So it's exciting to see that. I think every season there's more and more. And of course, there's also like the whole streetwear sector, which is huge, and like the sneakerhead culture, and there's so much more now, and there are more. I think brands are focusing on men more too as a key market, so there's that as well. So the interest is there, and then paired with actual availability of design, it's a cool time.
Yeah, and then that reminds me, like, let's go back to your brand. That's one of the things that I see. I think it's a new phenomenon that you have like independent creative people starting their own designs and like enriching the possibility, right? Because if you go to whatever store, like in a shopping mall, that I even like whenever I go buy clothes at Jan, like I can't seem to find anything that I find interesting. It's either not my style, or it's very, let's say, or too simple. Like even I will not wear it. But but then I was like thinking like, oh, you see, like I discovered like in Instagram this boho style that for whatever reason I'm very attracted to, even for like for menswear. And like you have like smaller brands that are becoming like multi-million-dollar things, but they're like very niche, and then how you can combine having like, oh, this I bought from Alex, which I follow, and then this I have from Hugo Boss, this it's like whatever Calvin Klein t-shirt. So you can like combine those kinds of like from a different array of brands. How do you see like in terms of fashion, like this combination of things that you find are very niche and at the same time the massive like brands? How do you see that?
Well, I think that's the ability the ability to combine high and low. That's real style. Anyone can just be like, okay, I'll put on all the brands and whatever, and you may not look that great. I think style is about really having personality, really finding the items and the pieces that represent you. And it's like I said, it's your first impression, right, to the world. So combining high and low is and combining things that are unique and niche with the mainstream, and figuring out ways to do that is kind of what makes each individual their own unique person.
Yeah, and I think that's a great thing about fashion. That is like it's about, at least today, it's not necessarily like following trends, but actually creating your own, right? Which I think that's great. So what I want to finish off is first just one quote that you have on your Instagram that I really like. That is like your influencer, fashion, style, travel, all the things, and you're like entrepreneur with your new brand. And the first thing you see when you go to like your social media channels is this phrase that if you don't go after what you want, you'll never have it, right? And I think that's like a lot of people doing like inspirational like Instagram things, but at the same time, I think this is so like important. So why do you have that on your...
Well, firstly, I didn't come up with that quote, but I saw it somewhere, and I just really liked it because I think it kind of embodies what my brand is about and what I'm trying to inspire other people to do. And it's it's kind of how I live. It's like the world is your oyster. You can have whatever you want in this world, and you just have to believe that you can have it, and you have to go for it. You have to work hard. You have to have the drive to achieve it. And that's a little bit what I want to communicate to, the people who follow me, because like, we're saying like social media is a bit of a highlight reel. It's your best life. And, so, what I share out there are the best highlights of my life. And a lot of people are like, oh, that's so like, you have such a great life, or like your travels look so amazing. And I think what I also want to embody and I want to remind people and share with them is that, you can have it too. And you can have more. You can have whatever you want. And you just have to go after it and make it happen.
No, that's amazing. And I think as a photographer, that's what I like about like the work that you do. And it's like, it's possible. It's like instead of there is a lot of negativity in like in social media and all that, I guess like a cynicism towards like beauty in a way, or like beautiful things or inspiring things. And to me, it's like you're missing the point. And that's why your content is so uplifting and so like thoughtful as well. Like whenever I see like even detail shots that you do of like and the way you interact, you make that interact with the environment, be it a beach or like even in the city, just stopping and sitting and sipping some coffee. How it's possible for everyone to if you go after it, you may get it. Right?
Yeah. So I think like you too. I find that I'm always in search of beauty, and I'm always in search of an aesthetic. So you kind of, you look for it and you capture it. So that's kind of what it's all about.
Awesome. Yeah. So the last thing I wanted to ask you is what's next for you? So I know you were working with a Blank and Blue company.
Yeah, that's definitely, well, I would say that's the big part of what's next. We're just getting started. So now that we've launched, I'm kind of like, okay, we've figured out, the prologue to this book. Now chapter 1 and then chapter 2. And it's like a lot of planning now. And we're just, we've finally finished that initial launch, which was a lot of crazy new work that I've never done, like, you know, sampling and getting our bulk production sent overseas. And actually, I mean, at this moment, we're still waiting for our true jewelry packaging that we don't even have that yet. So,
Oh, interesting.
so there's like a lot of things still in the works, even though we launched the site in August. There's a lot still to be done, but it's exciting. So I think now it's the time to plan what's next and plan the future of that brand. For social media, it's always changing and always going forward. So I have a lot of things on the go and lots of travel plans probably in the works. Sometimes I don't even find out that I'm going somewhere until 2 weeks before. So,
Oh, wow.
So anything could happen this year. But other than that,
Well, that's great. And,
I don't know what's next.
Oh,
You know, that's kind of the exciting part too of just being an entrepreneur and being you know, a blogger and kind of just a creative, I guess, working in the creative world. I mean, I'm sure you can relate, is that you can plan for what's next somewhat, but then part of the excitement and part of the fun is also not knowing what could happen and just welcoming new challenges and welcoming new opportunities into your life and just kind of, you know, letting go and letting the universe do its thing. And all of a sudden, if you put it out there, the intention, it's amazing what comes back to you.
Oh, that's fantastic. And with that, we'll finish off. Thank you so much for being with me today, Alex.
Thanks for having me. This was so fun to talk. And I hope everyone listening has enjoyed our conversation.
Oh, and one last thing. So if people want to follow you, all the links will be in the show notes for this episode. But can you tell, like, where do you want people to go to?
Sure. I mean, I think the best place to connect is Instagram. So that's at Alexander Kenton. And of course, follow Blank and Blue at Blank and Blue Co.
Yes, yeah, I actually highly recommend. I was going through the feed, and it's like, oh, it's so beautiful, it's so cool. Yeah, and you are designing everything, right? It's
yeah,
like
so everything from Blank and Blue is originating somewhere in my brain.
Well, that's fantastic. So, Alex, again, thank you so much for being with me, and until next week, this is your Wanderings podcast. So that's it for today's show. Thank you for listening to the Wanderings podcast. You can find show notes and links at pedrobonatto.com/podcast. If you like the show, I would love if you could share it with your friends or leave a review on iTunes. If you want to get in touch with me, you can find me on all social media at Pedro Bonatto. I would love to hear from you. You can find my photography work at pedrobonatto.com. The music for the Wanderings podcast is provided by the Blue Dot Ensemble, a music and dance group exploring traditions from all over the planet, where I am one of the founders and the lead drummer. You can find us at bluedotensemble.com. So tune in next week for another show. Until then, I urge you to keep following your curiosity, and I'm looking forward to our next Wanderings together.